He's using a dagger to peel an apple, removing the rind in one long curl, and the blade continues its path as his eyes lift, locking with mine. My whole head tingles. Hello friends. For today's video, I'm going to be chatting about the book Fourth Wing, which is a story that follows a very impractical war school from the perspective of the thirstiest girl ever. Woman. That correction will make more sense later. Before getting into the meat of this, I want to establish some of the expectations that I had going into it. One, when I read the synopsis on Goodreads, I thought I was getting more so fantasy with a little bit of a subplot perhaps that had fantasy romance, but it really is more so fantasy romance. There are heavy fantastical elements in the story, but the writing style, a lot of what pushes the story forward, those sorts of things, are fantasy romance. It's gonna be along the same lines as things like From Blood and Ash. I would say even the writing style remind me of that quite a bit. And I don't have anything against fantasy romance. I actually do really like fantasy romance, and for the past few years, I've been trying to pick up both more fantasy romance and contemporary romance, try to figure out what I like about these specific genres, figure out which ones really appeal to me. And I say all the time that if I can find Final Fantasy X, which is the greatest love story of all time, in book form, easy top 10, maybe even top 5. I'm also aware that for a channel centered around books, I bring that video game up a lot. But the point is that I like fantasy romance. I just know that sometimes that's not what everybody is looking for, and maybe that's not what you're wanting when you pick up a certain book. Maybe you're not in the mood to read a fantasy romance. You want something that's more fantasy driven, and you might pick this up and be like, oh, this is not what I expected. So just wanted to give that heads up that this is more so fantasy romance, and I also like fantasy romance, I promise. I do really care about people knowing this also though, because it's important that if I find something as perhaps maybe a tiny bit mismarketed, or initial synopses and taglines and things like that for the book might lead you to believe that you're getting something else, I try to always inform people as best as I can as far as what they're going to be getting when they pick up a book, because I really do care about people finding books that work for them. And oh my gosh, this book has definitely found its audience. So early ratings for this, when I was doing my anticipated releases for the month of May, which I do anticipated releases for fantasy basically every single month, and when I went to do that for this month, I was really surprised because there were a lot of early ratings. And the average rating was something like 4.8 something really high with hundreds of ratings already. And that makes sense when you have a Sarah J. Maas, a Brandon Sanderson upcoming release where the fandom just floods in early. And that was not the case here. There were a lot of people that were actually genuinely getting their hands on arcs and giving legitimate reviews. I actually even noted that there were a ton of reviews and that they were really positive, which kind of surprised me because the synopsis didn't necessarily sound particularly unique in any fashion. This one has some of the most 5 stars that I've ever seen for a book that's not yet out. This doesn't seem like anything particularly new, but sometimes you don't need anything particularly new. Sometimes you just need something done well. But I was super happy to see that so many people were enjoying it. It also made me more excited to pick it up. And then I got my hands on a copy early, and then I was kind of baffled. Every book fits different people's tastes differently, and I don't think the book was bad. It just was surprising that so many people were giving this book the ultimate of high praises. Ultimate of high praises. And even after it's been released, at the time I'm filming this, it's about a week since the book has been out, I think there's now around 7,000 ratings, and the book is still at something like 4.77. I don't think that it doesn't deserve praise or high ratings. It's more that this is like a phenomenon for me. I have never seen, never, in all the time that I've been reviewing books, a book with that high of average ratings. And if you're thinking, well, maybe fantasy romance readers tend to rate things higher, not necessarily. You can find other fantasy romance books that also have a lot of attention that don't have this high of an average rating. My husband, to kind of troll me, I was telling him, like, I'm really, really surprised. I mean, yay, I'm glad so many people are liking this, but also I don't quite understand. And then he sent me a snapshot of somebody's review, I think from their blog, and it says, "The book that made me rethink every 5-star review I've ever given. The moment I finished this book is now a core memory." Which, yay, that's exciting. And I think all of us can kind of relate whenever we have that book that we pick up and we're like, I don't know how any book can compete now. I feel bad for any book that I pick up after this because there's just no way it's going to compare, and nothing compares. Everything pales in comparison, and you just have all these very, very dramatic feelings and reactions. I think a lot of us have experienced that before, but it seemed like so many people were experiencing this book in this way. I have found many a time, because I often do a series on my channel called Funny One-Star Reviews, where I look at negative reviews for books, whether I like them or not. If they're popular, then there's a chance that I might do that style video for them, just because I think it's funny to see negative reviews. And I have found that many times people will say, did I get the same copy as everyone else? What are all of you smoking? I clearly read a different book. And every time I see that kind of review, I always think, well, duh, people have different tastes. Are you really that surprised that some people liked this? It's just how it goes. But I can't think of a better way to describe that feeling I'm having, where I just am really surprised. I'm really surprised because I don't understand. A lot of the video, I'm going to be going through what did and didn't work for me with this book, the same way that I would with a lot of other books. I am going to give very specific points because I actually went through and tabbed the book quite a lot. The angle, I can't get the angle. Whatever, I have tabs in here, so I'm going to be going through a lot of the book. I do want to start out by giving a non-spoiler section, so that way if you don't want to have the book ruined for you and it genuinely seems like something that you would enjoy, then I want to make sure that you have an idea of what this book is about, and then you can click off. But if you do want to stick around, maybe you would still want to pick it up even after hearing some of the specific plot points throughout, then you are, of course, free to do so. I do want to say I'm not going to reveal any really, really intense reveals or things like character deaths, anything that's really significant to the story. I don't want to reveal that, but I do want to go through certain aspects of the book that I personally found hilarious, and I wanted to bring you along too. Getting into the non-spoiler section, this story follows a young woman named Vi, which, by the way, tough shoes to fill. But Vi lives in this militaristic society. Her mother is a general, and a well-known general, who will have no wiggle room. She insists that her children all enter into this war college, and specifically she wants her children to become dragon riders. This is a very grueling process. It's a very difficult barrier of entry, and Vi is someone who her life has mostly been dedicated to becoming a scribe, so she's wholly unprepared to actually pursue this path. But on top of that, she has a physical disability that makes it so that she is often, when she has an injury, she is likely going to have a more severe injury than perhaps would be the case for another person. And then also she tends to get injured a lot more easily. If you are somebody who likes the idea of a story where the setting is primarily focused in on a war school, you like the idea of two of the main characters being individuals who have really difficult circumstances between the two of them, but these two end up having to go through these difficulties because they're both in the process of going through this rigorous school. And you also like the idea of there being kind of tension building up between them. Maybe sometimes it seems like they might become friends, sometimes it seems like they're gonna be enemies, and you also throw dragons into the mix, then you should definitely read Fireborn by Rosario Munda, because that is a fantastic story. If you're like, okay, I like all of that, but Fireborn has a lot of examinations of trauma and political structures and nods to Greek classics and Plato's Republic, and I don't really want any of that. Let's just throw that away, and let's replace it with thirstiness, a main character that is just as parched as can be, and the whole story is like, give me a little droplet. Okay, now a little sip. Now I want the whole bottle. And this is definitely the book for you. Being completely serious, I wanted to go through the pros and cons for this story, and I want to start with the positives, with the pros. One, the dragons. I'm always a sucker for dragons. It's pretty hard to do dragons poorly, but it also can be difficult to do dragons in a way that is exciting and new and interesting. And I actually did really, really like how the author did the dragons in this story. They were brutal, they were interesting, they were funny, they were grumpy. I really liked that they had their own code of conduct, essentially, and I also liked the way that the dragons, when they do bond with a human, the way that that bond facilitates the magic. And the way the magic works, I also thought was really cool. And it's interesting because I discovered in picking this book up that I believe this author primarily writes romance stories, and I think this was the first foray into fantasy, so it was kind of cool that the fantasy elements themselves stood out quite strongly. So the way that the magic works, getting back to that, is that when you do bond a dragon, there is a chance that you will get a certain ability, and the ability is different from person to person. So you have different possibilities. Some people can touch you and see recent memories. Some people have control over the shadows. Some people have control over lightning. So you have all these different possibilities. You don't know what possibility you're going to have when you bond a dragon, but if you do bond one, which is very difficult and very rare, you're not really safe, because there's still a chance that once your magic is activated, that you can still kind of overflow and actually die from the magic not being controlled well enough. So I thought that element of the stakes, the magic dragons, all of that was really, really cool. I also think that the representation for the main character's physical disability was incorporated into the story in a way that it really felt like it affected her. It didn't feel like it was just something to throw in. I thought that it was really cool to see a character who had that underdog element to them in a way that was more than just their class or status. On top of that, the pacing itself I thought was actually really solid. There was always something moving the plot forward, whether it was first the barrier of entry into the school, and then various different other sort of trials that they have to go through within the school, and then there's tension between a character, and then there's romantic tension between another character, and then there's something coming up with the dragons. There was just always something to push it forward, and so I liked that it had a lot of momentum throughout. There really wasn't a slow moment. And then because it is a romance story, I will comment on the intimate scenes without going into intimate details. I do think that they were pretty well done. I find that sometimes they can be so weird and so awkward, and this one, it was just kind of like, hey everybody, they're doing it. Here are some specifics, instead of trying to have all these really bizarre ways of wording things. Like, you can't just describe what's going where and when and from what angle, you know, like just stick to that. And I thought she did stick to that while still having the character having an emotional reaction to what's going on. So I thought the intimate scenes were done well. But the cons. So let's get into the cons a little bit. I think I was just mentioning before that the stakes involved with the magic and the dragons I liked, but essentially every other aspect of the stakes in this story were tremendously goofy to me. I thought there were so many stakes that were way too forced. It resulted in almost feeling like there's either plot holes or this is just the dumbest society, and the practices at this war school are just the most impractical of practices. So the stakes, it did lessen my excitement overall, because it was hard to take the serious stakes seriously when you had so many false alarms. I also understand, though, that for some people, it doesn't really matter if the stakes are all that realistic or make a whole lot of sense, because that's not really what they're there for. They like that it just provides something to move the story along, that they care more about in that moment, the amount of danger that they're feeling alongside the character. And also some people are here just because they're gonna turn that shower all the way to its hottest setting because they want some steam. Besides that, though, some other specifics that were definitely me things. The writing didn't really click with me. I thought that the delivery of certain world building details was not my favorite, which I will give examples. I also felt like the dialogue was kind of corny. Sorry, I've tried to find a nicer way to put it, but it was just some of the dialogue. And characters have a tendency to say each other's names constantly, and the story does that thing where if the characters don't like each other, they call each other by their last name, and if the characters are friends, they call each other by their first name, and the hunky love interest is gonna call you his cute little nickname. It had one of those elements to the names, but constantly, I'll give examples of that as well. But on top of the world building details not necessarily being for me, I also felt the way that the foreshadowing was done kind of bordered on just being predictable, which that's not going to be the case for everyone, because people notice different things. There's some books where there will be a plot twist and my mind is blown, and I'll have a friend be like, I mean, yeah, what else would it be? And I'm like, oh, I guess I'm just stupid. And then there are other times when you think something is really obvious and the opposite happens and you're like, I'm sorry, I'm not calling you stupid. The predictability element was definitely very high for me. And then also just character behavior, whether that was the main character, other people she interacted with, or some of the professors at the school, the instructors. Everybody's behavior was just so bizarre to me. And what they considered out of line and what they considered to be completely fine just felt like it was based off of whatever worked for that moment. And now I'll get into some examples. The story opens up with the first day of entry. So they have to cross a parapet and not fall down. And I'll get into that more in a second. But we open the story with our main character realizing, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to die today. And she is going up some stairs and she has her backpack, her sack, with all of her stuff in it. And she overhears her sister, her older sister, who is already within their military, arguing with their general mother. And right away, this is where you get one of the things about the writing that irritated me. It's on pages 4 and 5, so where I have pink tabs are examples of this particular thing happening, which is when an author puts periods between every single word to make it more pointed, and it happened all the time. All the time. Immediately, it's happening, like I said, page 4 and 5. So when they're talking to each other, her sister is telling her mom, she's not strong enough, Mom. She's already broken her arm this year. She sprains some joint every other week, and she's not tall enough to mount any dragon big enough to keep her alive in battle. Seriously, Mira? And then it says, what the hell? And then the mother and the sister kind of were just ignoring Vi, and they keep arguing. And eventually, the sister says, Mom, she didn't mean, and the mom cuts her out, and she says, get out, Lieutenant. So that happens a lot in this book, and that frustrated me. That's a very me thing. After the sister and the mom are done arguing, Vi is headed to go to the parapet, and her sister joins with her, and she's like, get rid of some of the stuff in your backpack, just you do not want any additional weight. Also, here's a vest I made for you. It's made from dragon scales. This will help keep you safe because the other cadets are going to probably try to come for you, so it's important that you have something to protect you. And they're talking about how the sister made this vest, and Vi says, dragon scales? How? Tien is huge. And the sister says, I happen to know a writer whose powers can make big things very small. A devious smile plays across her lips. And smaller things, much, much bigger.
Do you get it? Do you get my joke?
And then Vi replies, I mean, how much bigger? I have to admit, if the roles were different, if we're looking at two brothers talking, and they did the same thing, and they're like, I'm gonna make some things bigger, if you know what I mean. I would be like, well, you guys are pigs. I don't know you. So if this is my first introduction to you, I just think you're a pig. Pigs are really cute. Not pigs. Beetles. You guys are beetles. You're disgusting. I don't know, whatever. Fill in the blank for whatever thing you think is gross. But you get the point. I'm just kind of like, okay, your sister's on her way to potentially die, and you're making a joke about like, I sometimes use magic to make boys' parts bigger. It's just, I guess you're trying to lighten the mood. Make your sister feel a little better about her impending death. Within that same section, with that same page, another tab, is an example of what I was referring to when I say that I think sometimes the way the world building is delivered and the way certain potential foreshadowing is delivered ends up making the story very predictable. So this is where I'm going to say, if you don't want any hint of spoilers, you should probably hop off. Of course, you're welcome to stay. But her sister is trying to ensure that she knows just how dangerous this school is and just how likely it is that the other cadets are going to be desperate enough that they will come after her. So the sister's asking her, like, you've read the Codex, right? And Vi says that she has, and Mira says, good. Then you know that the other riders can kill you at any time, and the cutthroat cadets will try. Fewer cadets means better odds at the threshing, which is where dragons bond to humans. There are never enough dragons willing to bond, and anyone reckless enough to get themselves killed isn't worthy of a dragon anyway. Vi says, except when sleeping. It's an executable offense to attack any cadet while sleeping. Article 3, yes, but that doesn't mean you're safe at night. Sleep in this if you can. And she taps the vest. And I'm like, well, she's obviously going to get attacked in her sleep. Also getting into the impracticality of everything. So we already just kind of hinted at it right there. The idea that the cadets, it's fair game. If they're going to come after you, as long as you're not sleeping, it's a free-for-all. Anything goes. They can try to kill you, I guess. There are other exceptions that the characters are like, well, when we're in formation, that's when we're trying to be unified, and you can't come after us then. There are exceptions, but for the most part, just don't let your guard down. That's the idea. It's brutal here, but this makes no sense. This is absurd given the circumstances involved in their military. So We're going to start off by not even talking about other people harming you, but just the impracticality of some of these trials. So the parapet. When they're crossing the parapet, trying not to fall down, if they do fall, they fall to their deaths. They don't put any kind of netting down. They don't do anything. They don't have somebody who has cool powers that can just kind of scoop you up, because there are some people that have some cool powers like that. There is a character that has shadow powers, and he's not really concerned about the parapet. He's obviously past the first year of the college, and he's bonded to a dragon, so he had to go across the parapet without his powers. But my point is that, senior officer type of character could just be there with his shadow magic, because he even says, I can go across the parapet, and if I fall, it's no worries because I can have my shadows just pick me back up. Just have that guy around. Have him around for anybody that falls. You can just scoop him up, and you can be like, you're not getting into the college, but you can cook or clean, or you can become a part of the healing squadron, or a scribe, or a part of our infantry. You can do something else, but instead it's like, which this would make sense if everybody volunteered. It would make sense if it's like, you put your own life on the line, and if you don't make it, it's your own doing. But that's not the situation. It says on page 11, each of Navarre's 6 provinces has sent this year's share of candidates for military service. Some volunteer, some are sentenced as punishment, most are conscripted. So basically, a draft. You do not have enough people willing to go through this, so you force some of your young citizens into these trials for them to likely die, and you're not even gonna, I don't understand. You don't have that many people at your disposal. Why don't you just help them out? And I was like, well, maybe nobody's around. Maybe they don't allow the rest of society in because they're afraid of spies, or they don't want people viewing what they do because it might allow people to then practice ahead of time, and they want everything to be spur of the moment. How quick are your reflexes? Excuse me, sorry. I can't even, I'm like joking, thinking about this. You can't prepare. They want you to just be physically fit enough that you're ready for anything. Okay, maybe, but that's also not the case, because on that same page, I was noting that the main character is looking around and she's seeing there's like supply carts and wagons and such things, and then there's also some wagons that are there for the bodies, for all the people that fall down. And I'm like, just put up a net. Also, I think a second ago I said squadrant. They have the infantry quadrant, and the healer quadrant, and the scribe quadrant. They have quadrants. Just want to clear that up. As they're still making their way to the parapet, her sister's continuing to let her know, hey, look out for this, watch out for these people, don't do this. She's continuing to give her some sisterly advice, some experienced advice. And she lets her know, stay the hell away from Xaden Ryerson. And then the main character says, the air rushes from my lungs. That name, ... And then her sister says, that Xaden Ryerson. He's a 3rd year, and he will kill you the second he finds out who you are. And then and then Vi just says, his father was the great betrayer. He led the rebellion. What is Xaden doing here? And I'm like, when does anybody ever just start listing off facts about a person that you and the person you're talking to know? Why would that'd be like, hey, don't forget, like, if you're telling me my husband Sean is going to pick me up, and if you're like, hey, look out for Sean, he's going to pick you up. And I was like, Sean? He's from Tucson, Arizona, and he is one of 2 siblings. Okay, I'll make sure to look out for him. Nobody does that. So this is what I mean by the world building and the dialogue sometimes. It's very... But they continue on talking about Xaden. And her sister is explaining all the children of the leaders were conscripted as punishment for their parents' crimes. Do we see the problem with that? Does anyone else see the problem with that? I'll get into that more later. So anyway, she says, Mom told me they never expected Ryerson to make it past the parapet. Then they figured a cadet would kill him. But once his dragon chose him, well, there's nothing much that can be done. He's risen to the rank of wing leader. And Vi says, that's bull. And then her sister says, he's sworn allegiance to Navarre, but I don't think that will stop him where you're concerned. Once you get across the parapet, because you will make it across, find Dane. He'll put you in his squad, and we'll just hope it's far from Ryerson. Stay away from him. So again, period. Now getting into why I had such a long pause when I read the part where it talked about how every person who was a part of a rebellion in the past They were all murdered, and all of their children were put into the military. Why, you ask, might that be a problem? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because you are giving them access to military information, training, and potentially dragons. Why on earth? Why would you ever think that that was a good idea? It's not, by the way. It's not even a little bit a good idea. And then, of course, we are introduced to our main bad boy hunksicle of this story. And if you're like, what does this bad guy hunksicle look like? Just search any other love interest from any other super popular fantasy romance books. We'll do it together. The only notable difference between basically any of these characters is that sometimes their eye color changes. They're always going to be tan white guys. That color doesn't change. But their eyes, sure. I'm going to read to you anyway the description of this fella because it's really long. So here you go. He's tall, of course, with wind-blown black hair and dark brows. The line of his jaw is strong and covered by warm, tawny skin and dark stubble, and when he folds his arms across his torso, the muscles in his chest and arms ripple, moving in a way that makes me swallow. And his eyes are the shade of gold-flecked onyx. The contrast is startling, jaw-dropping even. Everything about him is. His features are so harsh that they look carved, and yet they're astonishingly perfect, like an artist worked a lifetime sculpting him, and at least a year of that was spent on his mouth. He's the most exquisite man I have ever seen. And living in the War College means I've seen a lot of men. Even the diagonal scar that bisects his left eyebrow and marks the top corner of his cheek only makes him hotter. Flaming hot. Scorching hot. Gets you into trouble and you like it level hot. And then somebody says his name and she thinks, Zayden Ryerson? And suddenly it dawns on her like, oh my gosh, I was just thirsting for this man that might want to kill me. They talk to each other by, of course, naming facts about one another. Starts by saying, you're General Sorengale's youngest. And then she replies, you're Fen Ryerson's son. And then he says, your mother captured my father and oversaw his execution. And then she thinks to herself, wait, like he has the only right to hatred here? Because it turned out, as she says, your father killed my older brother. Seems like we're even. And then he says, hardly. So anyway, it's established that her mom killed his dad for rebelling, and his dad, being a part of the rebellion, is part of the reason that her brother, her older brother, died. So I do like this tension of I think when people throw around enemies to lovers in marketing and in reviews and such things, sometimes it can be kind of like, I first met you and I got a certain impression that you were just like, I don't know, kind of weird, or you seemed a little rude, and then they have one more conversation like, oh, it turns out he's actually like pretty nice. And this is actually legit, oh no, your family killed my family. And I feel like that's a fair label. Enemies to lovers is a fair label for this situation. Oh my gosh, I have so many more tabs to get through. Next thing is probably one of my favorite parts of the entire book, and we're only 23 pages in. So when she has to cross the parapet, she thinks to herself like, oh my gosh, don't look down, don't flip out. You need to distract yourself somehow or you're going to get really, really tense and you're going to flip out and you're going to fall down, you're going to die. So she thinks to herself, well, I'm not a good singer, so I don't want to sing or distract myself. Or she does want to distract herself. Excuse me. She thinks I don't want to sing or hum because I can't sing a tune. So she decides instead to just list off world building details. And it's so funny to me. It's so funny. So I'm going to read it to you. And I'm going to read it in its entirety so that you can hear how long it lasts for. I'm going to take out the narration portions of it where she's not actually talking, and I'm just going to read her dialogue. Within this part, there is also another kid named Jack. and Jack is just rotten and bad. And Jack is the idea of some of the stakes being a little forced personified, because this kid is just out to kill her for basically no reason at all. She's small, and so he decides she's weak, and he's like, we have to cull the flock. What's the phrase? We gotta trim the fat. So when they're on the parapet, he's making an effort to hurry along, catch up to her so that he can push her off, which is allowed because there's a kid behind him that he goes out of his way to turn around and push some other kid off of the parapet. This kid, while she's just shouting world building details, he's like, I'm coming for you, Soren Gale. And he pushes that kid off and he's just hustling along trying to get to her. So we're gonna look at this scene together. The continent is home to 2 kingdoms, and we've been at war for 400 years. Navarre, my home, is the larger kingdom with 6 unique provinces. Tirandor, our southernmost and largest province, shares its border with the province of Kravla within the Poromial Kingdom. To our east lie the remaining 2 Poromial provinces of Breivik and Signisson, with the Esben Mountains providing a natural border. Beyond Kravla, beyond our enemy, lie the distant barrens, a desert. Within Navarre, Tirandor was the last of the bordering provinces to join the alliance and swear fealty to King Reginald, who was also the only province to attempt secession 627 years later, which would have eventually left our kingdom defenseless had they been successful. The kingdom of Poromial mainly consists of arable plains and marshlands. It is known for exceptional textiles, endless fields of grain, and unique crystalline gems capable of amplifying minor magics. In contrast, Navarre's mountainous regions offer an abundance in ore, hardy timber from our eastern provinces, and limitless deer and elk. The trade agreement of Ressen, signed more than 200 years ago, ensures the exchange of meat and lumber from Navarre for the cloth and agriculture within Poromial 4 times a year at the Athben outpost on the border of Kravla and Tirandor. Our next Sorengale. Tirandor encompasses the southwest of the continent, made up of hostile mountainous terrain and bordered by the Emerald Sea to the west of the Arctic Ocean. To the south, Tirandor is nearly impenetrable, though separated geographically by the cliffs of Draelor, a natural protective barrier.
Knowing somebody who can't even carry a full rucksack past the entrance exam, you're a mistake, Sorengale. It's really for the best that I take you out now, don't you think? It's so much more merciful than letting the dragons at you. They'll start to eat your leg by ripping your leg while you're still alive. Come on, be my pleasure to help you out.
And then she finishes making it across the parapet. I just want to add that I also think it's hilarious that she recited all of this information and that this kid is like, I'm gonna come for you, I'm coming for you, while he's also trying to like shimmy across. Can you imagine? Because I'm doing it like, yeah, I'm gonna get you, but he's probably more like, I think it's possible that having the world building details revealed in this way maybe doesn't feel that odd, but I think if you imagine somebody from our own world just reciting information, it makes it so much more obvious how hilarious it is. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, my home, and to the
I'll kill you! Kill you, Brooks! You're a mistake!
one nation under God.
You and your dirty, small hands are disgusting. You disgust me.
After that, you get your first introduction to the dragons. It's very brief, but it definitely gives you a taste of what you're going to get with the dragons. The dragons are really cool. So all of the instructors are kind of giving these melodramatic speeches about like, are you pumped you all made it? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, are you ready to become dragon riders? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, are you? And then he has his dragon show up, and the dragon is super frightening, and one kid's wetting himself, and some of them are running away, and then the dragon just lights them up, just kills them. And then Vi is like, huh. And then they're like, you think you're ready? Well, you're not ready. And then they head on off to school. And one of the first things they do is they're going to assess your physical prowess. They want to see when you're sparring against one another what that shows of your abilities. And I made sure to check, because of things that transpire in this part, I made sure that I was like, this is an assessment, right? And I have a tab where the instructor says, no blades today, we're just assessing. So I'm like, yeah, all right, I'm not out of my mind. They are just assessing. Sorry, I just hit the thing my mic's on. And Jack, the kid that's gonna kill Sorengale, he decides he doesn't just want to do an assessment. So they're watching everybody sparring together, and he happens to be paired with some weakling, and they're watching him, and he just breaks the kid's neck. So he has his arm around the kid, and then it says the sickening crack of bones breaking sounds across the gym, and the first year goes limp in Jack's hold. And they're all like, oh my gosh. And then the instructor says, what did I say? You broke his damn neck. And then Jack says, how was I supposed to know his neck was that weak? And you're thinking, surely something else happened after that, right? Surely the instructor punished him, suspended him, sent him to go do some sucky chores or something, right? No. I will say, I liked that in this book. It wasn't like, she's just strong because she has a strong will. No, she doesn't have the training, and thus she has to figure out ways around it. She is an underdog, so I liked that we kept that and we didn't just make her super good at everything she tries. Because Sorrengail realizes that she doesn't really have a chance every single time that they start to spar, and they're not always going to be assessing. They're actually going to be sparring in the future, and she realizes, okay, I have to figure out a way to look out for myself. And because she's really knowledgeable, she figures out a way that she is going to volunteer to serve breakfast in the mornings, and she has a sneaky way of finding out who she's going to be paired with, and so she finds ways to poison them. And she does poison them differently each time. It's not like the exact form of poison each time. She doesn't kill them, but she just makes it so that she times it by just putting the right amount on, that they're going to vomit and get really sick in that way, sick to their stomach right before they spar. Or one of them is going to feel really faint and lightheaded, stuff like that. And then that way she has an actual chance when they're sparring. So when she goes to get the supplies that she needs to make these poisons, she's climbing up a tree, and then she realizes Xaden Ryerson is around with all of the other children of the former rebels, which I'm like, you're really not thinking that this is a big deal? This doesn't seem suspicious. They're out past curfew. They're all meeting together, but she's like, he's just looking out for them, because she overhears him giving them some advice, and she's like, wow, that's actually pretty nice. Huh, that's innocent enough. I won't tell on him. Even though a reminder at the beginning, she was like, this is bullshit, when she found out that he was even allowed in. So she just is kind of like, oh, maybe he's nice. I don't know. But she's still afraid of him. So she's like up in the tree. He knows she's there, so he makes it known that he knows. And she says, how did you know? Let me guess, you could smell my perfume. Isn't that what always gives the heroine away in books? And then this is when it's revealed that no, it wasn't her perfume. Which he says, he's like, no, it wasn't your perfume. I have shadow magic. And so now we know that Xaden Ryerson has shadow magic, because of course he does. He's the cool, dark-haired bad boy. Eventually, she ends up overdoing it with one of the poisons, and the person gets sick long before the sparring session is supposed to start. So there needs to be a replacement to spar with her for the day, and none other than Xaden Ryerson volunteers. And so now we're gonna get some like sexy, his weight is pressed up against her. Oh my gosh, look how powerful he is. You're gonna get a lot of those moments. And some of these moments are so funny, but I'm gonna start with just something I find hilarious. So he's decided that his nickname for her is going to be Violence. You know, like Violet, but it's Violence. And she corrects him, and I don't know why this was so funny to me. They're in the middle of getting ready to spar. You can tell I really know what I'm doing. And so they're getting ready to spar, and he says, going for blood today, are we, Violence? And she goes, I'm sorry, I don't know why it's so funny to me. She's like, my name is Violet. Her name's even italicized. Just can't imagine, like, I don't know, if I'm being especially goofy and feisty one day, and my husband's like, ooh, you're feeling, I can't even do that voice for Sean. Okay, let's say Sean's like, oh, you're feeling fiery today. L, more like hell. And then he just starts calling me hell from now on, like, just, you know, like, hey, hell, you're in a mood today. And I'm like, it's L. You don't need to correct. He obviously knows your name's not Violence. But anyway, he calls her Violence constantly for the rest of the book, because, you know, it's this cute little nickname for her. He tells her, because he's like right up by her face, you know, in her ear. And he is basically telling her, like, I know you're poisoning people. He says it less directly than that, but he's making it known, like, you're never going to get better if you're always weakening your enemies. You need to actually fight somebody who's strong so that you can get stronger, which seems like pretty sound advice. And she's still convinced, like, why would you even give me advice if you want to kill me? She's constantly like, are you going to kill me? Are you after me? You want me dead, don't you? She says it to him all the time throughout the book. But anyway, when he tells her, like, you've been poisoning people, I know you've been poisoning people, she says, how did you know? Which I'm like, it's pretty obvious. The other part of the scene, and I can't get over this, I just think it is so funny. It's not the best. We will get to what probably is my favorite scene later, if I can get through it, because it makes me laugh. But he, you know, she has her daggers that he's been periodically taking off her. He's fighting her unarmed just to show you can have all your weapons and I'm still going to destroy you. That's how weak you are. You need to learn. And so he's been kind of periodically taking the daggers and then being like, go get him. Go get him. And he's kind of mocking her at the same time and humiliating her. But she has one of her knives in her hand and he grabs her hand and he turns it and he like puts the knife back in the sheath, which I understand the imagery here, okay? I get it. But Vi thinks the move is unnervingly ... hot. And then she's like, you're not going to disarm me? And he's like, defenseless women aren't my type. And then they're done sparring. Did you have a good day at work?
It was fine. Same old, same old. The old grind.
I got a hand cramp.
Oh, you alright? I can help you with that.
Fast forward a little bit to when he knows that she's there again, kind of like when she was in the tree. So she overhears him talking to one of his buddies, and then she ends up telling him, I know you know I'm here. So he says, no questions about where I've been, because he's legit like, I'm being really suspicious. You're really not going to ask any questions? So anyway, he says, no questions about where I've been. I honestly don't care. You really don't, do you? Nope. It's not like I'm not out after curfew myself. What are you doing out after curfew first year? Debating running away. How about you? Feel like sharing? The same. And she thinks, sarcastic ass. And I'm like, is that warranted, Vi? I don't know. Sorrengail, if that's warranted. And then she says, though, I almost wish I hadn't paused, but the sarcastic ass part is just too funny. But she goes from, he says, what are you doing out here first year? And then she says, debating running away. How about you? Feel like sharing? The same. Look, are you going to kill me or not? The escalation is phenomenal. He tells her he hasn't decided yet, and I actually really do find Vi's response here legitimately funny. Like, I think she is being funny in this moment. Her reply is, well, could you? It would definitely help me make up my plans for the week. Shockingly, though, he chooses to not kill her.
I really want my PJs, but Sean's napping.
I know you're here.
Sorry.
Why are you in here?
I just wanted to get some PJs really quick.
Are you gonna kill me or not?
What?
Can you figure it out already? I just want to be able to sleep in peace.
What do you think?
So then the next chunk of the book, we're kind of looking at other trials that they have to go through. There's some pretty sad things that happen with some of the side characters. I know I said at the beginning that I didn't really want to give away what happens with certain things, because if you do want to pick up this book, I don't want to ruin some of those more exciting moments. But one of the things that they have to do, one of the trials, is a combination of, is it called American Ninja Warrior? Where they have this really, really, really intense obstacle course. It's kind of like a combination of that with Wipeout. So Vi's been flipping out about this. That's why she's like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And Zayden's kind of like, you can do it. And she does it. Yay. And then they have the threshing, which is where they have a chance of being bonded with the dragon. They do have an opportunity to be presented to the dragons first. So if the dragons, if any of them are like, I don't really like that one, they can just incinerate them right then and there. Vi has seen that Jack decides that he wants to kill a little dragon. They are too small to actually carry a person in flight and such things. And so Jack, being the super stable fellow that he is, sees this little golden dragon, and when he's supposed to be trying to bond a dragon, he's like, while I'm out here with these dragons, let me go try to kill this little one. Which is, this guy, this is what I mean by the ridiculous stakes. Because I'm like, really? Why? That's the stupidest move ever. You've seen these dragons light people up time and time again just for being annoying. But he's like, I gotta get the weak one. I gotta eliminate them. And so Vi overhears this, and she's like, I gotta go warn the little dragon. So she's like trying to find the little dragon, and she's running, and she's like, fly away, fly away. And then the dragon's just kind of looking at her, and it's really cute. And she's like, gosh darn it. And then Jack and some of his cronies show up, and they're like, oh, perfect. Both the weaklings in the same spot. We'll kill both of you. And then a giant black dragon shows up, and it's like, and they run off. Jack runs away, and it turns out that Vi ends up bonding the black dragon that's massive and the tiny cute little gold one. Yay! So now we're finally getting the dragons, and this is a close to 200 pages, a little under 200 pages in. I think legitimately you'll see I have a lot of tabs in the first, I don't know if you can actually see them. Same problem from before. I have a lot of tabs in the beginning, and then very few after that, because once the dragons are introduced and you're kind of past the ridiculous nature of this war college, I do think that things get much more interesting. I think it opens up, and it appealed much more to me in the latter half because you're getting a lot more of the broader world. The stakes actually feel more organic because you're looking at the Griffin riders. They're called flyers. Somebody actually, Xaden corrects her about that later, which is pretty funny because it is the least appropriate time to correct her. But anyway, so there's flyers, and they're some of the enemies. And then there are also a lot of other things that they have to deal with, border disputes and whatnot. So you're starting to get more hints of that. And it's actually really cool. There's a scene where our character Vi is meeting up and she sees her sister again, and then they're attacked. And so there's a lot of cool things that happen after that. And plus the dragons, they can talk to the person they have a bond with. And the dragon is super sassy, and he is great. And the little one is really precious. So I did like everything that was going down with the dragons. I thought they were really cool. And like I said at the beginning in the non-spoiler section, things start to heat up between her and Xaden. And while I think some of their interactions are super corny, and I think that they a little bit haven't really talked much, and she thinks for a lot of the book that he wants to kill her. But despite that, things heat up. So it's kind of weirdly almost insta-love, even though it takes forever for things to actually happen between them. I still feel like once they got past the like, are you going to kill me? You want to kill me? Why don't you just kill me now? Once they got past that point, I actually enjoyed their dynamic a little bit more. All that said, when Vi bonds two dragons, this is unprecedented. It's unheard of. It's never really happened. And so a lot of the leaders in the military at this academy, they're like, what do we do? I guess the laws of the dragons are outside our human laws, but this has never been done before. And other people are going to be pissed because it's already difficult enough for people to bond a dragon, and there are only so many dragons. If you don't bond one, but you made it through everything and the dragons didn't kill you, you can redo your first year, but that sucks. And there's no guarantee you're going to get a dragon even if you redo it. So people are going to be mad. People already try to kill each other to try and up their chances of getting a dragon. So if she has two, that's just a target on her back, right? They're all concerned for legitimate reasons. Again, there are some stakes that make sense. And when they're all kind of gathering together to figure out what are we going to do about this, they convene, and then they come out and they announce their decision. And they say, Coda has relayed that the dragons have spoken regarding the Sorengale girl. And Vi thinks, woman. I mentally correct him, my stomach nodding. And I get it. I get that sometimes when you're an adult and people are calling you boy or girl, it can be very patronizing and condescending. It basically says your opinions don't matter because look at you, you're just a little girl. And I get that it's annoying, but I'm like, this is where we draw the line? Really? Because there have been so many problematic things happening at this school, and this is the one that you're like, excuse me. There's also an interaction after they've all bonded dragons, and it's awesome, and they're like, yeah, we did it. They're all kind of sitting around, hanging out, and she looks across the room, and she sees Xaden cutting an apple. This is, I think, my absolute favorite scene in the entire book. It is so funny. So funny. So, Xaden's dragon is the mate of her dragon. So now there's even more tension between them. So she's hanging out with her friends, and it says, my gaze snaps to Xaden and my chest tightens. So freaking beautiful. Apparently, my body doesn't care that he's as dangerous as they come in the quadrant because heat rushes through my veins, flushing my skin. He's using a dagger to peel an apple, removing the rind in one long curl, and the blade continues its path as his eyes lift, locking with mine. My whole head tingles. That doesn't happen. That's not a thing. I've never, ever in my life been like, wow, this is just like, I can't even contain myself. There is a scene where Vi goes to sleep, and shockingly, they attack her in her sleep, and Xaden shows up and saves her. Xaden's already dressed, and he clearly has been out and about doing things, as have some of his other buddies, who once again are other people who were the children of the rebels who were murdered. But Vi's like, good thing that he was out and about. So he rescues her. There's also a really cool moment where the little dragon kind of stops time, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. They can only do it for like 10 seconds, but it's still pretty awesome. That scene really intense because it's essentially Vi really would have been killed if that dragon hadn't loaned their power in that moment and then allowed that time for Xaden to get there. So I did like that moment. I thought it was really cool. Toward the end of the book, I did get really irritated with Vi getting upset over something that I was like, actually, Xaden's 100% right. Actually, Xaden's usually right about stuff. I think a lot of times love interests are just kind of, they just are existing to be hot, and that's kind of true for him, but at least he is actually pushing her, giving her decent advice. He's actually a decent wing leader. You know, he's actually a decent character, but you find out, who's surprised? Not me, that he has been doing some stuff that would be technically illegal. Him and all the other children of the rebels. So when she finds out, she's so mad. She's livid. And she's so upset with him. She's like, I loved you, and you used me, and you lied to me. And he's like trying to calm her down. He's like, listen, just listen, okay? I need to, this is dangerous stuff. I need you to listen. So he's trying to talk to her, and she doesn't want to hear it. She's so mad. And she thinks his father may have been the great betrayer, may have cost my brother his life, but Xaden's treachery cuts just as deep. No, it doesn't. I don't even know your brother. He's a fictional character, but absolutely not does Xaden chatting with some people he shouldn't be chatting with nowhere near the same as the actions that led to your brother dying. No, that is so dumb. That's so dumb. I mean, Vi's been kind of always a goofball this entire book, but at this point I'm like, and they think you're smart because of what exactly? You dum-dum. Not the same, not even a little bit. Also, it's during this really heated, important conversation that he corrects her about the griffins and their riders. He says, actually, they're called flyers. And she said, I'm sorry, are we seriously arguing the semantics of your treason? And he says, dragons have riders and griffins have flyers. And I'm like, all right, I like Xaden. That's so funny to me that he's like, I mean, yeah, I guess we are kind of also arguing about semantics. Like, I don't want you to look dumb out here, okay? Here's why her reaction is so ridiculous to me. I understand being upset that you were lied to. But once he explains why he lied to her or why he didn't tell her the full truth, once he explains that, I'm like, dude, that's a really legit reason. If there's any reason to not tell her about stuff, that is the most legitimate one I have ever heard. It actually is not forced. Because I know a lot of times in a lot of stories, not just fantasy romance or romance, but a lot of stuff, there's something that pushes the characters apart. They were like this, and they get mad at each other, and it's usually over something really absolutely ridiculous, but then they come back together eventually. But anyway, they're having their moment where they're mad at each other. And I'm like, this is absolutely 100% a legitimate reason for him to have not told you this. So, rewind a bunch to when I talked about the different kinds of powers that people can have. Her childhood best friend, who she still frequently talks to, who still cares about her deeply, who still, you know, because they're good friends, they'll like nudge each other and he'll like give her a hug or such things. He kissed her once. That stuff. He is the one that has the ability that when he touches you, he can read your most recent memories. So Xaden explains, I couldn't risk telling you this information in the event that Dane touched you and then was able to see all of these things. And her reply to that is, Dane would never, which is so dumb because he absolutely would, and he's been shown that he would do this in previous scenes that we've gotten in the book. But also, Xaden explains to her, like, you would not know if he was doing this to you. You would not be able to tell. It's not like you can see, it's not like he's glowing or something. So he's explaining you wouldn't be able to tell. But anyway, the whole last chunk of the book, there's exciting fights and battles, and it turns out there's even more threats than people ever realize. There's some sad moments that happen at the end, and then there's a really big reveal at the end of the book. It was exciting. It was an exciting thing to have happen at the very end. So that's Fourth Wing. Was I deeply moved by this book? Did I find the writing to be profound? Do I think that the plot was incredibly inventive and unique? Not necessarily, but was I thoroughly entertained? Absolutely. And I do think that sometimes people have a tendency to treat things that are more entertaining in nature as opposed to the other things I mentioned. There is this way of treating those books and also the fandoms of those books as if they are lesser, and I think that's nonsense. I think that every kind of book, whether it's something extremely serious in nature, whether it's something that it's really difficult to read but it's sort of cathartic because it allows you to kind of go through certain experiences you had in life, and then also the books that are just silly or cute or cozy, I think there's a place for so many different kinds of books. They fulfill different things within us. If I wanted to read something really serious, I'm not picking up Fourth Wing, but if I want to just fly through something and be thoroughly entertained, then yeah, it serves its purpose. So I know that I had a lot of fun going through these different points throughout the book that I found really funny, but that's the thing, I found it really funny and I wanted to share with you because I thought it was hilarious. I thought maybe this would bring a laugh to you, and so maybe in the same way that this book was entertaining, hopefully this video was also entertaining. I want to add also that when I was looking into this book a little further after I'd read it, I saw some people saying it's technically considered new adult. And new adult is an age range that's not necessarily as prominent as young adult and adult. So what you get within new adult, it's kind of hard to figure out what to expect. I think this one definitely leaned more so in it's written in a lot of ways like young adult. And sometimes in some instances, I would say even less mature, but it has more adult content. And I think that if new adult starts to emerge, then you'll start to see it balanced out where you're going to get some new adult fantasy where it has a more mature tone and maybe certain themes, but the writing will also feel more like it's adult. It just happens to be following people of a certain age where they're going to be experiencing different things in life. So I think new adult is just a tricky age range that we don't have a lot of experience with, and I say tricky meaning it's hard to know what you're going to get with it. But I am excited that there is content like this that is starting to become more prevalent, because new adult for a while started to become a thing, and then it really just dissipated and it never amounted to much. And so I'm hoping that we start to see more books that are like this, because I'm always for more variety, different kinds of stories, different kinds of main characters, different kinds of tones and voices. I like variety in my stories. So I'm glad that this book exists. And also, last thing I'll mention, when I was looking into this, the way I found out it was considered new adult, because a few people were telling me, oh, Fourth Wing is new adult. And they said it said on the author's Instagram. So I went to look into it, and she does consider it new adult, because at the bookstore, you're probably going to see it shelved in adult. So she does consider it new adult, but when I was on her Instagram, I saw that she has an organization linked that helps children in foster care, which I thought was absolutely amazing. So I want to have that linked as well if you'd like to check that out. I think that's awesome. A lot of props to that author, and I'm really happy that she's finding so much success and that so many of you are having such a good time with this book. I mean, I had a good time with it too. I think that's obvious. I found it so amusing. But anyway, I'm so glad that so many of you are having so much fun with this book. Hopefully a lot of the rest of you, if you do pick it up, also have fun with this book. And I'm also additionally glad because the success of this is just going to lead to this author having a bigger platform and maybe more people having their eyes on this organization that she supports. All that said, I hope that you had a lot of fun with this video. I had so much fun making it. So thank you for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.